Persia started as a small cluster of communities on the Iranian plateau. But look at this map. What began as a single region slowly pushed outward in every direction. This is the empire at its height. A realm from the Aegean to the Indus, ruling nearly half the known world. The real surprise? The early Persians didn't begin with the geographic advantages most empires had. What they did have was a talent for solving problems that stood between a small homeland and a vast connected state. Beginning in the 6th century BCE, Persian rulers oversaw a cascade of innovations that solved their biggest constraints: water, heat, distance, and warfare. This is the story of Persia's rise, told through the inventions that shaped its path from a small province to one of the great powers of the ancient world. Let's go to where the Persian Empire began. In the 6th century BCE, in a region called Persis, modern Fars province, southern Iran. To truly understand this story, you have to put yourself in the shoes of someone trying to work and live on this land. You walk past small fields that stay green near a spring, then step into plots where the furrows dry and crack. A few more paces and dust. That single spring can't support a burgeoning empire. For most civilizations, the story would start in a very different place. When you think about early empires, you think about giant rivers that fueled them: the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates. The Persians had nothing like that. Water was around, but it was locked deep inside mountains. Unlocking that water from the mountains is hard enough for the Persians, but getting it from the mountains to the villages was an extreme challenge. In the summer, temperatures reached 120 degrees. That meant water in canals would just evaporate and never get to the villages. Some villages had wells, but that didn't scale nearly enough for large-scale agriculture that an empire needs. This is the moment when the first major Persian innovation appears, a system that could move water quietly across miles. The Persian solution was a Qanat, an underground aqueduct built to guide water from the foothills to settled land without letting the sun evaporate it. Engineers began at the mountainside aquifer, sinking a deep mother well to reach the water. From there, they cut a nearly horizontal tunnel angled just slightly downward, so gravity alone would pull the water across miles of desert.
This would have meant that the engineers who were working on these projects had to be taking very careful and precise measurements, likely using techniques originally developed in astrology for measuring the movements of stars.
To dig it, they sank a line of vertical shafts from the surface, each one connecting to the tunnel below. From above, it looked like a chain of circular pits stretching toward the horizon. Below, it was one continuous channel of cool, protected water. Because the water stayed underground almost the entire way, it remained shaded, safe from evaporation, and naturally cooled. At the far end, that hidden stream finally reached daylight, emerging as a reliable flow that could support farms, orchards, and entire towns that had no natural river at all. The spread of these underground channels marked a turning point in early Persian life. For the first time, water could travel in a controlled way across long distances, linking foothills to new settlements on the open plain. And some of them are still running 2,000 years later. Qanats freed Persia from the need to have rivers near every town and village. So cities like Yazd and Nishapur grew out of the desert from places that should have been uninhabitable. As these cities expanded, they formed dense neighborhoods where homes, markets, and workshops pushed close together. Persia's economy was diversifying, and parts of work and life were shifting out of the fields and indoors. But there was a challenge: unbearable heat. Walk through a Persian city at midday, and the heat follows you inside. Temperatures regularly reach 120 Fahrenheit in summer. Most buildings are sun-dried mud brick, and after a morning in the sun, their walls radiate warmth in every room. Step through a doorway, and the air barely moves. Houses have a single entrance and a high, small opening because their larger windows meant weak walls and blowing dust. The heat presses in from every surface. Indoors, you felt a limit on how big and productive these cities could become. Persian architects answered with a design that shaped how inland cities functioned. Their solution was called the Bagdir. Some people call Bagdirs wind catcher towers, and that kind of explains how they work. It's a vertical structure built on top or alongside buildings to harness ambient air and create passive cooling without using a mechanical device.
This was a sort of reverse chimney, in effect. On windy days, an opening at the top of this tower would catch the wind blowing by and funnel it down into the living space, causing air circulation, keeping the indoor temperatures relatively comfortable despite the extreme heat outside.
As air enters, it's directed downward into interior spaces. Simultaneously, warm indoor air rises and exits through the tower, creating suction that draws cooler air from below or shaded Qanat-fed channels. Some towers also include water features at their base. As air passes over shallow pools or Qanat-cooled water, its temperature drops further. In effect, the architecture uses wind, shade, geology, and natural convection to create climate control in a desert environment, centuries before electric air conditioning.
Do you want to know how we animated what you just saw? Our AI filmmaker uses LTX. Hey Dynamos, I'm Nicholas Carlson, CEO of the company behind the rise of civilization, and I'm here to tell you about the platform sponsoring this show. LTX is the AI platform for video production, and that's what we're making here at Dynamo. Let me show you how. First, we open up LTX's homepage dashboard. From here, we can make a storyboard, create images or videos, or even produce a rough cut.
Let's click into My Projects so you can see how we made those animations behind the scenes.
Here you can see the prompt we used to generate the clip, the model we used to make it, and that it's in 4K. Whatever you dream up, you can create right here. We use LTX because it's a one-stop shop for our creative production. LTX lets us move faster, collaborate more effectively, and make more incredible shows for you. Use this link to start creating with LTX today. Thank you, LTX. Now, let's get back to the episode.
This invention allowed the Persian Empire to be more than a coastal empire. Inland cities like Yazd, Kerman, and Ray were populated. Cool air obviously sounds better than hot air, but remember, this was more than just comfort. It was critical to the growth of the Persian Empire. By the 4th century BC, about 150 years later, the Persian Empire was growing. But to sustain that growth, to truly flourish, it needed to be able to move perishable goods across the empire. You walk into a royal storeroom at the start of the warm season, just as tribute caravans are arriving from across the empire. Under the Achaemenid system, most taxes weren't paid in coin, but in goods, food, drink, and materials that poured into the capitals in huge seasonal waves. Couriers unload clay jars of wine from Armenia, baskets of dates from Mesopotamia, pomegranates from the plateau orchards. The room feels fast, stacked to the ceiling with supplies the empire depends on. But as the day heats up, you feel the problem immediately. The air grows thick, the jars warm under your hands, and the fruit softens before your eyes. An empire can conquer territory, but it can't conquer heat, not without a way to keep its stores from spoiling. The growth of the Persian economy depended on food preservation, and the solution was an ancient refrigerator called the Yakhchal.
These were ancient ice houses used to store ice and keep it frozen for extended periods of time, even in the extreme desert heat, and could cool the inside of these structures by as much as 15 degrees Celsius or 60 Fahrenheit.
The structure typically features a thick-walled, conical dome above a large underground chamber, built of a special water-resistant mortar made of clay, sand, ash, and goat hair. At night, or in colder months, shallow pools of water, often filled by Qanats, freeze in the desert climate. So the Persians would collect that ice and transfer it into the subterranean chambers. The insulation and shade of the dome kept temperatures low through the hottest summer months. The Persians used Yakhchals to store meat, medicines, and other perishable goods, and all that is very important. But if you ask my kids, the coolest thing about them is that's where the Persians could store frozen desserts.
There's a long tradition of ice creams and sorbets and frozen fruits served in Iran as delicacies going back to antiquity thanks to access to ice like this.
So the Persians could store perishable goods, but how do they move them from one end of the empire to the other? Remember, that was a vast distance going from India to Egypt to Central Asia. The Persians faced another challenge, and that was how to get messages across the empire. It would go something like this. You leave the city with a sealed message at your side, expecting to be gone for days. By the third sunrise, your horse has slowed to a walk, hooves dragging through dust as the road stretches ahead with no clear end. At night, you sleep on hard ground beside other travelers, the same message still tied to the saddle. When you finally reach your destination, the news you carry has already been waiting for you to arrive. The goal was not only faster travel, it was consistency. Persia needed a system that tied its farthest regions to a single center, one that carried information with speed and reliability. Starting in the 5th century BCE, Darius I ordered engineers to rebuild and unify existing routes into a single spine stretching from Sardis in western Anatolia to Susa in Iran. They cut paths through mountains, raised causeways over marshland, and laid stone surfaces where traffic was heavy. But the real breakthrough was the relay system.
The famous example cited by the Greek historian Herodotus places a single rider capable of delivering a message from Sardis in modern Turkey to Susa in modern Iran in just over a week's time, traveling constantly by horseback through a series of relay stations. And that was the great innovation of the royal road system.
These roads and relay stations had an incredible impact on the Persian Empire. They allowed messages to travel 1,600 miles in just 7 to 9 days. A unified road system strengthened every part of the empire. Orders moved quickly, trade routes expanded, local officials stayed connected to the central government. Communication held the state together. Think about what that did. It enabled the government of Persia to squash rebellions in faraway lands. It enabled trade of silver and textile to go from Egypt all the way to the Indus Valley. And one of the things I find most remarkable about this is that major roads today still trace the network first designed by Darius. Years passed and the empire changed hands. The story of Persia moved into its next phase, shaped by new leaders and new ambitions. The first Persian Empire was the Achaemenid Empire, and it ruled for several centuries until Alexander the Great conquered it. But then his empire collapsed, and from its ashes rose the Parthians. But they weren't just handed the empire. They had to fight for it, and they needed a powerful military to do it. The landscape the Parthians fought to control was vast and open. And the best military for that kind of task is a horse-based military, a cavalry. But cavalries can be stopped by spears and arrows. So how do you stop spears and arrows? Enter the Cataphract.
The Cataphracts was a form of heavy cavalry that developed in the Parthian Empire. The Cataphracts were heavy cavalry, some of history's first true heavy cavalry soldiers. The rider and the horse dressed head to toe and head to hoof in scaled steel armor.
This combination of protection and momentum gave the Parthians a decisive advantage. Their cavalry could drive straight into enemy formations and break through the line through weight and force. Let's all just pause for a second here and imagine that you're a Roman centurion and you see something coming across the distance. And it's not just a regular horse, but it's a horse and a man draped in armor, and it's moving at you very, very fast. It's terrifying. The rider wore laminated or scaled metal plates from shoulders to shins. The horse was covered head to hoof in overlapping scales that protected its neck, chest, and flanks. This level of protection required extraordinary metallurgy. Flexible enough to move, strong enough to stop arrows, and light enough that a horse could still charge at speed. To make this work, the Parthians bred large, powerful horses capable of carrying both a fully armored rider and the weight of the armor itself. When these units hit the field, they functioned like a shockwave, an armored wall of momentum that could smash through infantry lines and withstand missile fire that would cripple normal cavalry. All during this time frame, another empire was growing in the West, the Roman Empire. And eventually, these two empires were going to compete and clash. And that came to a head in 53 BCE at Carrhae. The Romans had far more military might, and normally the Romans were technologically superior, but not that day.
At the Battle of Carrhae, the Romans were at a loss of what to do against cavalry like this.
That day, the Cataphracts helped the Parthians defeat the Romans. Yet again, innovation and invention had propelled the Persian Empire forward. Encounters like this revealed how far cavalry design had advanced. Armor that protected both rider and horse changed what heavy units could do on an open battlefield.
Something to take from the lessons of ancient Persia, they made use of the innovations and technologies of all of these different peoples under their purview, combining and using different ideas and concepts in new and novel ways and spreading those ideas between one another. This is always the best way for innovation to happen.
The empire grew because people built on one another's knowledge. Every new challenge invited a new idea, and those ideas connected communities across a vast landscape. The Persian Empire thrived on innovation and invention. And one of the coolest things is it didn't come from one central organization. It came from all across the empire. It was humans collectively working together to rise from the muck and form something great. And really, that's the story of this series, The Rise of Civilization. How humans work together to make something better and brighter for the future ahead.